How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling during this most newsworthy week in history of this industry. We've got Brian Alvarez of Figure 4 here, and we're going to have Brock Lesnar, former NCAA champion, who's currently wrestling at Ohio Valley Wrestling. We talked to him for the first time. He'll be up in about a half an hour. We'll be taking your phone calls as well as your emails, and I think that this may be a day where it may be a little bit easier to get through on the phone than it maybe would have been in the last, 2 weeks or so. Certainly, we were flooded with calls for Jerry Lawler, and, of course, with the sale and everything, it's been pretty darn hard to get through, though people have gotten through. And anyway, that's so you can call us at 1-877-392-3299. In about a half an hour, we'll start taking phone calls. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
That's good. God, you sound so different.
I know. We shouldn't fool the listeners. I'm actually at Dave's house today on the other microphone. And for all you wondering, he's sitting here in a FUBU sweatshirt, and he's eating a banana.
None of that's true, but that's okay. Okay, so last night was the night that it finally hit, because there really was no Thunder, and I will say I didn't miss it for a second, but I will miss it. Monday, it's going to be a total change of life.
It was just weird. I usually have to set the VCR every Wednesday night, and last night I sat there and I had nothing to do. No VCR to set, no show to watch. It's kind of weird.
And I guess you're working on an article for Penthouse on the demise of WCW. Is that basically what it is?
Yes, they just heard about the demise a couple of days ago, and they said, what would be a good column is a column on the 10 greatest moments in WCW history. And I said, hey, that's great. And I hung up, and I started trying to think of 10 great moments in WCW history, and I got stuck about 4.
No, I don't know.
You helped me last night.
Yeah, but then, when I started thinking of all these great moments, they ended up all being terrible.
I know. I get this email, and your email was so long, and I thought, man, how could he have thought of so many great things? And it was like a quarter of it was the great things, and then there was about 25 lines of the most horrible things that have ever happened in that company. And it was great.
Let's see. Of course, pretty much everyone in the company, as far as office people, were laid off yesterday at the meeting at the power plant. A couple of people were kept on, but they're only being kept on for 30 more days to help in the transition. The first taping under the auspices of the World Wrestling Federation, the first television show on TNN is going to be on May the 12th on a Saturday night from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. The taping will be May the 9th in Trenton, New Jersey. So those dates are now pretty much, they are finalized. That's the real deal. And what else? I saw the New York Daily News story today. And,
one more thing about the meeting real quick that was so lame was Brad Siegel was not there.
No, that's right.
After all that he had done, not telling these guys anything, or when he was telling them something, it was basically a lie. To not show up on that last day, what a jerk.
Yeah. Well, just I'll tell you what, there are people who think that, of all the people responsible, ultimately he was the most for killing the company. I mean, and there's a lot of blame to go around to a lot of different people, some of whom have just resurfaced in the last day after being, hidden for a while, like Vince Russo. But Siegel was the one who made a lot of what were the ultimately really bad calls. The original hiring of Russo in October, I guess it was, of 1999, I can't call that a bad call because at the time it actually looked like a great call. Mm-hmm. But about 2 months, 3 months later, when it was obvious that it was not a good call, pretty much every call that he made after that turned out to be pretty bad. I mean, actually Bill Bush was the one who got rid of Russo, and Siegel backed him up. But then Bischoff and Russo were working, behind the scenes with Siegel and kind of backstab. I don't want to say backstab Bush. It was just Bush was failing too. So
yeah,
they got back in. But that decision to put them back in, when you have two guys who, I can remember on this show when that thing started. We were going 7 weeks tops before those two had a blow up. They just couldn't work together. And if
7 days.
Yeah, but if we could say that, if we could go in there and go, 7 weeks, these guys are going to be at each other's throats for all the obvious reasons. The idea of putting them back in there together in power, that just shows how foolish it was. And then that was the period that destroyed the company. That just was the period that destroyed the company. And ever since then, it's just never gotten back on track. And we can talk about that. I don't know. I always saw this morning in the New York Daily News. Marshall Fink had his column on, just about, they pegged the purchase price, by the way, at between 10 and 20 million, which is, I'm not surprised. That's about where I figured it, and it's such a sad number, considering, Fusion was about to pay $48.7 million for the same property, all of, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but their 48.7 was including the TV. Without that TV, I don't know if it was worth more than 10 million.
Well, it is to Vince.
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean,
potentially. To anybody else.
To anyone else starting on, it's not. Not without the TV. Absolutely not. The thing that is kind of weird is, during this whole period when it was obvious the thing was going to get sold and people were writing this off as this horrible investment by Turner, my feeling always was that, like with a sports franchise, a lot of sports franchises lose money year after year after year, but when they sell it, the price has gone up so much that they end up making a big profit on their investment. And I figured the eventual sales, number, which, a year ago looked to be well into the several hundreds of millions of dollars because this was taking in more revenue than almost any professional sports franchise, except for something, big like Manchester United or the Yankees or, someone like that. I mean, when you're talking about a company taking in, $150 million to $200 million a year, that's a substantial amount of money. That this thing was going to go for several $100 million, and that would offset whatever, year by year losses and the big couple of year profits. The Turner side would actually make money at the end. But, they bought it for like $9 million. They sold it for, let's say, 10 or 15, and the losses were a lot more than the gains, and they did not make money at all on this adventure after 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
But now I guess the story that went on is that Ted Turner bought the company in 1988 solely to drive Vince McMahon out of business. That was his entire motivation, which is so totally untrue. And, this is going to be... I just have a feeling...
That's kind of been the fake story for a while, though, hasn't it?
Well, the fake story from Vince McMahon, it has been, of course. But it's anyone who, looks back at anything of what was going on in 88, that was so obviously not the case. And even more so, if Ted Turner really wanted to put Vince McMahon out of business, I'm not saying he could have done it, because I don't know that he could have, but he could have crippled Vince McMahon in the early 90s just by spending money for all of Vince's talent. I mean, he could have outbid, he had 100 times more money, 100 times more money than Vince. He could have outbid him for every single wrestler worth it. They could have gotten Hogan, Savage, Piper when they were still younger. They could have gotten everyone anytime they wanted. Vince had nobody on guaranteed money contracts except for maybe Hogan, and they didn't. The fact that they didn't says that they were just looking for cheap programming and to keep that programming on the air. That was their goal. It was not until Bischoff was there that anyone in management did anything that would look to be that they were, up until that point, they were afraid of competing with Vince McMahon, if you want to know the truth. And Bischoff was the first one who wasn't afraid to compete with Vince McMahon. At that point, they really did compete. They competed hard, and whether the goal was to put Vince out of business or build their company up to be the biggest possible, it was a little bit, I'm sure that there was a little bit of both in that motivation, in those years, 95 through 98, I guess. Mm-hmm. But, that has nothing to do with 1988.
I think it was almost all just the desire to put Vince out of business, because if it was just a desire to make the company as big as possible, there's so many things that they did that they would not have done if that was their, sole intent or even their main intent. There were so many hot-shotting deals and, putting guys on TV.
But that was just because they didn't they didn't understand wrestling. That was, don't get me wrong, there was a period where, when the ratings were close, they were, but both sides did this. Both sides, when that year when the ratings were close, they were both doing, total desperation tactics, for week-by-week ratings. And Bischoff, quite frankly, did the dumber ones because, they gave away Goldberg and Hogan for free, which is the most obvious one. But, both sides were competing like that during that period. I'm not saying Bischoff didn't want Vince out of business as like a feather in his cap, but putting Vince out of business, theoretically, if he had done that, I think that the whole motivation was still to build the company as big as possible. And he built it up big and then collapsed it because he didn't know how to sustain it and didn't understand, that giving people bad shows and when people leave the buildings happy in a business that's, like this, ultimately that kills you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else? The only other big news
What about the New York
today,
Post story?
The one by, what was her name again? The New York Post story. Oh, that that was just stupid. That was the one where they said that they treated that thing where Vince McMahon said that Ted Turner was going to come to WrestleMania and give him the contract. They treated that like it was a news story. I mean, it was so funny. I'm reading this thing. And then they go, Turner's side could not be reached for comment. And the WWF said that we do not comment, something along the lines of we do not comment on storylines. And then they still printed it like it was a news story.
No, I think the actual thing was they don't comment on people's comments inside the ring or something to that nature. Well, characters. It's something along the lines of characters.
Characters' comments inside the... Yeah, because it's storyline. It's fiction. And they took it as like...
You think that comment would sort of give away that it wasn't actually going to happen?
Well, I think anyone with a brain would know that it wasn't going to happen. So...
And the funny thing is, even in the storyline, Vince said that he was going to come deliver the contract. And at the end of the show, Shane revealed he'd already signed the contract. So, even in the storyline, Ted Turner wasn't going to show up.
Yeah, I know. So... let's see what else. Johnny Red Shoes Dugan passed away actually on Monday. Who was, I think he was probably the most famous wrestling referee of the 1970s. Just because the Los Angeles promotion had a lot of, had probably more national, well, they had more national syndication than anybody else in that era because, they were on the Spanish International Network and, he had a good nickname, Red Shoes Dugan. He always had the red shoes. And also he refereed a lot for New Japan Pro Wrestling. So, I think it'd be safe to say that, him and Joe Higuchi were the two most famous, referees in the world during that period. No one else was even close, I don't think. Because none of the WWF referees were really known outside of the WWF. Dick Kroll had a little bit of a name. Stu Schwartz in Florida, but, again, these are all regional names. Let's see. Look at the poll here. Who would you hire as lead announcer for World Championship Wrestling? And people are going, how come I didn't put Joey Styles on the list? And the reason is that I think that pretty much it's not a real consideration, as far as I can tell. So why put someone, the names that we put on the list are names that I thought were the five most logical, not logical, but most likely choices. Tony Schiavone got 22% of the vote, which is much higher than I expected. Scott Hudson was the leader with 35%. Mike Tenay had 23%. Kevin Kelly, 7%, and Michael Cole, 14%. Today's question is, how will the cancellation of WCW programming affect the time you spend watching wrestling? A, you will spend more time watching WWF. B, spend more time watching independent wrestling. C, spend more time watching international wrestling. D, will spend less time watching wrestling. And E, stopped watching WCW a long time ago, so it will have no effect. So, I think with me, it's going to be a little bit of B and C. A little more independent wrestling, probably a lot more international wrestling. Anything else you want to talk about before we start hitting emails? Because we certainly have a ton of those.
I don't think so.
Anything as far as, as far as anything further as far as talent and things like that, nobody has heard anything. Just so you know. I know Brian has as well. We've talked to several different wrestlers from WCW, and the reality is none of the WCW wrestlers have heard anything substantial from the WWF or from WCW as it regards their contract. There's been stuff that's been rumored and stuff like that. And, we printed stuff and talked about stuff that, has been talked about by the WWF and has been talked about by WCW. But the wrestlers are totally, as far as any official word, they're in the dark. I've talked to, several people who, are in this situation and they don't know anything. And if you don't know anything, when you ask, what your decision is, how can you make a decision when you have not been told anything? So everyone's up in the air.
I've talked to a couple of people as well that said that anything that you read on the internet, likely about someone deciding what they're going to do at this point, is probably not the case because nobody's been talked to. So I don't think anyone's made a decision. As far as final decisions, I think Goldberg and Sting are still certainly far more likely not to do anything. And as far as Nash has publicly said that he's not doing anything. Yeah.
But again, all this can change. If WWE wants any of those guys and gives them a good offer, they'll all come. Every single one of them, if they want them bad enough. And if they don't want them bad enough, then they won't. Everything's really in the WWF's hands. In all of these things. It's not in the rest. The wrestlers have, they got to look out for themselves. But when it comes to the decision, Vince will make the decision for them, but based on how much he wants them. None of them are really going to be making any decisions. I don't think. Mm-hmm. Okay.
No.
Let's go. Do you suspect that between XFL games running along and WCW's new time slot opposite Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels regrets the day he ever heard the name Vince McMahon?
I think he regretted that about week 3.
Yeah. But see, I don't think And maybe, things will change. I don't think for 1 second anyone at NBC and Lorne Michaels care that WCW Wrestling is going to go on TNN, which they don't even consider their competitor, on Saturday night as a factor of the ratings of Saturday Night Live. Now, it may turn out to be someday, but I don't think that they care. Now, as far as the XFL, that 1 week, Lorne Michaels doesn't like it because, he was promised by Dick Ebersol that he was going to get big lead-in ratings and was going to help. And it turned out that they're getting the worst lead-in ratings in the history of television, and it's not helping. So, he probably regrets that.
I think if WCW ever grew to the point where it was actually going to be a ratings stretch Saturday Night Live, they'd move it to a better time slot first.
That's right. If it ever turns into a hit, TNN's going to put it in prime time anyway. You're absolutely right. So it will really, if it ever affects Saturday Night Live, it's going to be for like 6 weeks because as soon as it's a hit, they're getting it out of that slot. You're right. You're totally right. Let's see. I don't know if you read Russo's internet statement that he has no intention of returning to the WWF. Yeah, I read it and I believe that he was begging for a job. That's how I read it.
That wasn't exactly what he said. It was more along the lines of,
if they need me, I'm always here for you, Vince.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
of course he's not coming back now. They don't want him.
Yeah. Listening to the King Show last night, I think Vince let both he and the Cat go on purpose. It's purely because he had made a business decision. He felt he no longer needed the services of the Cat and Jerry anymore. It's simply business. Vince does what's best for business. End of story. Vince does whatever he wants to do. I don't think he even thinks about... I don't say that. That's not fair. I think he thinks about business, but right now I think that his motivation is not business at all in any of this stuff. His motivation is that he can do what he wants, and he does what he wants. Do you think... just as an example, as far as business decision... When you're going to say that, and this is not a defense of Lawler whatsoever, okay? If he thought that Heyman was better than Lawler, and this was his way of getting rid of Lawler nicely, that's fine. There's no way, okay, but you know what? But that's ridiculous, because there's no way anyone's going to tell me that anyone thinks Taz is better than Lawler. You can make the argument for Heyman, not Taz. So as far as, is it better? No. Is the product better on Tuesdays because Lawler's not on the show? You can argue it may be better on Monday, even though the ratings don't show it, but I don't think the announcers have anything to do with the ratings anyway. Now, as far as the Memphis situation, you tell me how it is better for business that the developmental guys no longer have a live television show to practice their craft on a very well-rated live television show in Memphis, practice their craft, and to learn how to get over in front of real viewers. Why? For what reason? How is that beneficial? This is all spite, and you can't argue that one differently.
With someone like Jerry Lawler there to help them.
Yeah, Jerry Lawler is not. I know that's the other part of it. Is just like there's so much to learn between Bobby Eaton and Jerry Lawler. That is like the two greatest different people to be in a company with those guys, because everybody loves. I mean, a lot of people don't know who Bobby Eaton is because of everything. But Bobby Eaton is a high flying guy who did everything in the ring, so he knows when to tell guys, don't do this because it'll shorten your career. Do this way. He's the nicest guy in wrestling, and he's a quiet guy and all that. And then Jerry Lawler, is golden throat. I mean, he's the one who knows. I mean, you watch Jerry Lawler do an interview and do a promo. You will learn how to do a promo. I mean, you watch, people talk about Cornette or Heyman and all these guys that were good on interviews. They all learned. I mean, they learned from a lot of guys. But I can tell you, Cornette learned more from Lawler, and you watch Heyman, he learned a lot from Lawler, too. The guy, and those guys like, just as a name like Pete Gass or Rodney, they want to learn how to do an interview. It's a hell of a lot better learning, with Jerry Lawler there than, learning from each other, so to speak, so anyway, what was I going to say? That's pretty much it. Let's see. Where did you go to college and what was your major? Major in journalism at San Jose State. Anyway, when the writers of WWF write the show, what do they actually write? They basically script out the interviews, leave time for the matches. What?
Segments.
Yeah. Just like, cut off time for matches, basically. And, it's a lot of it's done as it goes because live television, you can't time it perfectly anyway. And kind of go through, like, the basics of the storylines. Let's see. It's obvious from listening to Jerry Lawler's comments on yesterday's show that the reason Vince fired Stacey was because he wanted to get rid of both of them. Vince had no place for them anymore in his super promotion, and this was an easy way to send them packing. I think Vince is a gentleman, not to say to the King the real reason for firing the Cat is this would hurt his feelings as well as the Cat's. Think about it. It's not easy for Vince to dump people just because they have no place in the company, but you can't keep people who are no longer needed, especially in this industry. It doesn't work money-wise. Okay, now why would Lawler
I don't know
not
about that
be
line about it's
that?
not easy for Vince to dump people.
No, because he did it very easily on Monday night. Let's see. While I agree... Okay, I'll go with one more. While I agree that putting WCW in the heat slot would be a good short-term alternative, it has flaws. Every month, WWF would lose its lead-in. WWF pay-per-view would lose its lead-in, while WCW would have to move the show up 1 hour. No, we were talking about 6 to 8. I think 6 to 8 on MTV would be a great slot, and it could work as a lead-in because they could use that 2 hours. In fact, I think it would be better, and I'll tell you why. Because they could use the 2-hour show the night of the pay-per-view to constantly plug that the pay-per-view's going on without going to the arena and having to do that live stuff for an hour that kind of, makes it, the fans are sitting there for too long because of that first hour. So I think, you know what I'm saying?
It's kind of weird, though, as far as trying to keep the two promotions separate, to have a WCW show where throughout they're promoting the WWF pay-per-view that's coming up next.
Well, Super Astros did that. They were a separate promotion, but when I used to watch Super Astros, all they did for every commercial break was plug the WWF pay-per-views.
But they weren't really considered competition.
These guys aren't competition either. Everyone knows they're owned by the same person. I mean, it's public knowledge.
Yeah, but that's like the whole deal with, Hall and Nash. Everybody knew they were under contract, but, that didn't hurt the storyline that they were there to invade and take over.
But they were on the same show. And if there was an NWO television show, as had been, talked about, for a long time to make Thunder the NWO show, and thankfully they never did it because it would have been a total flop. But if they had done that, would they have not plugged the pay-per-views on that show? Of course they would. So, I don't see why talking about the pay-per-view coming up takes away from anything that people don't already know. I mean, it's already, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at it like it won't really be competition, but if Shane's going to be over there, that's the way they're going to consider it. And, if they had the NWO TV show for Thunder, they could plug a WCW pay-per-view because those guys would be on the pay-per-view.
Okay, now you tell me that you think that TNN show will will not be plugging the WWF pay-per-views. They'll be talking about the WWF pay-per-views on the television show anyway, in the 11 o'clock time slot. They're not going to give up those 2 hours not to plug that pay-per-view. Let's see. Okay.
Should tell everybody the press release that they sent out yesterday about WrestleMania. The headline was that Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon would have the Battle of the Father and Son at WrestleMania this year. No mention of Rock and Austin until the first paragraph.
That's right. So we have, well, what can you say? I'll tell you what, I don't think that the Rock Austin match has really been promoted that great, even though it's going to do a big numbers just because Rock and Austin, it couldn't fail. I mean, it couldn't, but, a couple weeks ago when they did the thing where Kurt Angle put the ankle lock on and Austin ended up stunning Rock, I thought that was really good. Since then, none of the interviews or anything like that have really gotten me jazzed. And then the WCW news, and everything's so overwhelmed. Not that it's not going to do well. It'll do great. The show's going to be, I expect the show to be, a fantastic show. I expect it to be the greatest WrestleMania ever. It may not be, but I'm expecting that.
I just kind of think there's something about the fact that Rock just won that title, I think he should have had it for at least 3 or 4 months or, some period of time. Now it's like Austin's coming to win this. It's just like he's coming to win the title. It's not like he's coming to beat The Rock, because Rock just won the title.
Yeah. You're right.
Rock is built up as this long-term champion, and Austin's finally getting a shot at the title and at Rock. Now it's just like, I want that belt, and I don't like you.
Yeah. I agree. We've talked about it before. I think we all think Rock should have won the belt a little bit earlier. Let's see. Out of all the gimmicks in the Gimmick Battle Royal, where the hell is Outback Jack and Ted Arcidi? Hopefully,
still a couple of days left.
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to find that. Well, Outback Jack, who the hell was that guy?
They had a one-man gang and Duke Drosy.
Yeah, they got added. But that means, they're going to use him as one-man gang and not Akeem, which is interesting because I think more people wanted him as Akeem. Just because it was such a horrible gimmick. Let's see.
Maybe he can enter twice.
Is Jerry Lynn still likely to appear on WF soon, or will they save him for WCW where he might be a better fit? I think that's all being worked out. He was at TV Monday and Tuesday, but they didn't use him. So, I don't know why obviously there was a plan to bring him or to use him at TV because they brought him there, and they just didn't. We got a lot of questions about Shawn Michaels and if he's going to be at Mania, and I don't know the answer. So can't give an answer. he didn't endear himself. He did not play his politics very smartly by showing up in less than 100% condition after all those months of not being around. That was not very good timing on his part. Let's see. What do you think about unifying the WWF, WCW, and ECW heavyweight titles to create a triple crown? I think that they're not even going to bother with the ECW. As far as WCW and WWF, the day will come when they unify it. I think but hopefully that's 12 to 18 months away. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Beyond the Mat will be on.
They are mentioning the Rhino's a former champion, though.
Yeah, but they don't really, it's not portrayed like it's any big deal. In fact, they pretty much say like the last champion, like it's not like he doesn't really have, like he didn't come out with a belt or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think, and I think that it's just one of those things where, Paul Heyman acknowledges it, but it's not like they announce him as, like when he comes to the ring for his match on SmackDown, it's not like they're going to announce him as ECW World Heavyweight Champion Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what I think was funny was last week in the Ross report, Jim Ross is talking about how they need to do a better job. They need to do a better job talking about the whole ECW deal and, promoting it or whatever. And this is from the same guy that every time Paul Heyman even mentions it, he just totally ignores him.
Yeah. I think that they don't know. Well, you know what? Part of that's also there's two communities. There's the ECW community, which I think everyone sees the internet as, which is probably some truth to. And then there's the big TV audience, which I think everyone sees that really nobody in the big TV audience, the majority of the viewers, don't even know anything about ECW. So I think he's playing for each audience maybe. I don't know. He says, Beyond the Mat will be on Stars East at 11:35 p.m. Eastern and Stars West at 2:35 a.m. Eastern Time. We got Brock Lesnar on the line. This is Brock Lesnar, year 2000 NCAA champion, currently wrestling for Ohio Valley Wrestling. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing really good. I guess just to give everyone a little bit of background on you, you wrestled at University of Minnesota, and I think took second in the NCAAs in '99, and you won it in 2000.
Yep.
And when you were when you graduated from, in fact, I should even go back. When you were a junior in college, that was the first I had heard about. Brock Lesnar would make a great pro wrestling prospect. I guess it's probably because of the physique, and. When were you first approached, and what made, I guess you actually talked with both WWF and WCW before going WWF, is that correct?
Yeah, I did. I was approached in about January of 1999 by Gerald Briscoe and then also Jim Ross. And they just approached me, and they knew that I had another year of eligibility left in wrestling. They just wanted to know that they wanted to let me know that they were interested in me, and that they would be contacting me in the near future. And I had another year left, so I told them that I wasn't available for another year and a half, and even after that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do yet. If I wanted to go wrestle and try to make the Olympic team, and so on and so forth. So, but they just told me that that they called me every now and then and reminded me that they were still interested in me and wanted to sign me on a deal and stuff, and I was just weighing my options and waiting to finish school, so I had something to fall back on. My parents always said that I need to finish my college degree, and which I did, and so.
And were you a big fan growing up?
I actually I never watched a lot of professional wrestling because. I grew up on the farm in South Dakota, and we just didn't have a lot of time for it. I didn't have the time for TV, as a matter of fact. So until I got to college, in '96 is when I really started watching professional wrestling.
And what were your? So I assume you were a fan of it because we had like Kurt Angle on. He's talking about a lot of the amateur guys. They look down on pro wrestling. Some of them don't, but most of them do. So
Yeah, a lot of In my wrestling room at the University of Minnesota, professional wrestling was not very admired. It was something that it's just the amateur attitude, because most of the professional wrestlers, were never amateur wrestlers, and except for Kurt Angle, and there's a few, you know, I don't even know maybe if Dr. Death maybe was one, and Vern Gagne, you know, maybe just a handful of guys were amateur wrestlers or whatever, and so it was just something that, I guess it was the amateur attitude, you know, those guys, that's not wrestling, you know, because in the amateur eyes, there's so much, and now at me, only about 7 months into professional wrestling, it takes a lot of skill and hard work and so on and so forth. And me as an amateur wrestler, we put so much time into, you know, and we get so less respect for our sport in amateur. You know, I think that the public, in the public eye, the fake wrestling got more attention than the real wrestling, and I think that's why a lot of amateurs had a bad attitude towards it.
Mm-hmm. Now, how is mentally, because you're going from, when you go from the amateur world to the professional world, you're going from a world where the worst possible thing is to lose to a world where if you let losing bother you, you'll drive yourself crazy because it's kind of immaterial. I mean, were you able to switch it on off? Because a lot of athletes, you know, good athletes, that losing thing, it's real hard for them to accept. But in pro wrestling, you just kind of have to.
Yeah, I guess when I hung my singlet up and, you know, threw my shoes in the closet, I was retired. You know, I gave up the sport of wrestling as an amateur wrestler, and it's just like being in the business world, you know. So you're going to win, you're going to lose someone, you know, in business or whatever, you know. So to me, it's I have no problem putting somebody over. You know, I have no problem with that at all. You know, it's just I get paid the same either way, so it doesn't bother me, you know. And I guess it's something that hasn't affected me yet, and I don't really think that it will. You know?
How would you compare the amateur wrestling training with the pro wrestling training?
Repeat the question. I didn't hear you.
How would you compare the amateur wrestling training with your pro wrestling training?
I would say that the training in the amateur level is very, very demanding, and also so is the professional level on your body, but mentally and physically, and I mean, we practiced, you know, 3 to 4 times a day, whether it was, you know, running, lifting, drilling, wrestling. It's very, very demanding on the body. I mean, it's something that it's totally different than any other sport, because by the time you put it this way, you go through an NCAA tournament and you feel like that by the 3rd day of wrestling, you just want to fall over and die, because I mean it's so you know, vigorous. I mean, it's just demanding on your body, and mentally drain yourself. And most of wrestling, amateur wrestling, is about 80% mental. You know, you can go out and have yourself beat before you even step on the mat. You know, it's a mental game, and it's kind of like playing chess, you know, but it's so physical and very demanding. I mean, a lot of guys, unless you're a very good athlete, I started amateur wrestling when I was in kindergarten, you know, and it took me 19 years to become an NCAA champion, you know, and I was never even a state champion in high school, or, you know, so it took me a long time to actually excel at the sport, you know. So I mean, and to the same too as professional wrestling, you know. Granted, I'm very athletic, and I think that I move very well in the ring and stuff, but this is totally different. I mean, this is you got to put psychology into things. You got to, you know, your ring awareness. You got to understand. You know, everybody's got to be on the same page. You know, and I think this becoming a professional wrestler has been very demanding on me also. You know, so I'm saying that both sports back to back is very different for me, and has been what I expected it to be and what it is totally two different things. You know, I had no idea it'd be like this. You know, I had no clue, and I'm enjoying every day of it.
Now, in your senior year, or at what point in your life, you know, you're going through amateur wrestling, and I mean, there's the chance, you know, it's the year 2000, so it's Olympic year. There are a lot of the guys, I mean, going for the Olympic team. I mean, you were not a shoo-in for the Olympic team, but certainly you would have been in the hunt.
Yeah.
When did you make the decision that I'm not going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to go right to pro wrestling. I mean, it was just that the NCAA tournament was just so draining, and then that was like, okay, that's it. And when did you like at what point did you make the decision I'm going into pro wrestling after the season's over?
I think once I achieved the ultimate goal of my life, which was being a national champion, I think that pretty much decided it for me. If I would have ended up second place at the NCAA tournament, I would probably be wrestling still, because there would be an empty spot in my life where I needed to fill. If I would have ended up second place, I would definitely be in Minneapolis training for the U.S. Olympic team. But I think once I won that tournament, it was like a big weight was lifted off of me, and I didn't care. I could care less about even putting my wrestling shoes back on ever again.
Wow.
Because it was just so draining. I mean, it was that my senior year at the University of Minnesota was due to the media and the hype and just how Jay Robinson, my head coach, just built me up to be somebody that I tried to be, and I very well played the part very well. They built me up to this unstoppable machine, and the media in Minneapolis just kind of caught on to it, and before you knew it, I had my own radio show in Minneapolis, and before I knew it, I was in the newspaper, and Lesnar leads the University of Minnesota, this, that, and the other thing. And before you knew it, I had mentioned something about football, that I was going to, I wanted to play football because I had another year of eligibility left. And then, once the word football got out there, the media it just started snowballing. And then they caught that the WWF was interested in me, and then they caught that WCW was interested in me. But finally, come about a month before the NCAA tournament, I told Jay Robinson, I can't handle this anymore. If I'm going to win this tournament, I need to be left alone. And which finally we cut off all the media, my radio show, everything, and it just finally came down to where nothing was more important to me than winning the NCAA tournament. And I'm glad that I look back, and I think that was the right decision that I made and that Jay made for me.
I guess you're probably feeling really good about this decision as well right now, because when you were done with college, you had offers from both WWF and WCW. And what made you choose WWF?
I think just the professionalism of when I went to meet with Jim and Vince, and just I wanted to be with a top-notch business, because I'd always been surrounded by. I always tried to surround myself with, to fly with the Eagles. I always wanted to be around people that always had big goals, and that's why I chose the University of Minnesota also, is because they were building a destiny, and just as Vince McMahon is, I think with him buying out WCW and everything, which I had no idea at the time, but just the nice people and the professionalism and that's probably one of the biggest things that I felt. I felt at home with them guys.
Who'd you talk with in WCW?
I talked with Eric Bischoff and mostly him, yeah. Mm-hmm. And Paul Orndorff also.
What as far as were you following the NCAAs this year, and the Minnesota ended up winning the national championship?
Yeah.
You followed it pretty close?
Yep. Yeah. I'm very good friends with all those guys on the team yet, and I followed them match by match as much as I could, and I was disgusted with myself that I couldn't have been there, but due to I'm here now, and I'm in the real world, so it was hard for me to get back, and I wish I could have attended that, but it was impossible. But yeah, having 10 All-Americans for the first time ever in NCAA Division I wrestling tournament. The University of Minnesota did a fine job of pulling it off.
What do some of your friends and former teammates have to say about you going into pro wrestling?
Oh, they're excited. Pretty much everybody that I know was very supportive of me. I mean, because most of them are fans of it, and most of them are excited to hopefully to someday see me on TV. And I had lots of support.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about Shelton Benjamin, who's your tag team partner, and also he was your coach at Minnesota, right?
Yeah, he wrestled at the University of Minnesota. He was a two-time All-American for the University of Minnesota. I was recruited after him. I think his last year was in '98, and then I came, and then he was a grad assistant in '99, and also some in 2000. He was a graduate assistant coach there, and did lots of amateur wrestling. I've known Shelton in the amateur ranks for probably ever since 1996, so I'd known of him, but we'd never actually wrestled in a competitive match. You know, it was just kind of ironic how we ended up on the same team. It was, but yeah, we trained together for 2.5 years in the amateur ranks. So,
now, in Ohio Valley, who are the guys? Who are the guys that you have really learned from, as far as some of the guys that have been there for a long time, and what type of stuff are you trying to pick up from different guys that are there right now?
Danny Davis has been a very, very big help to me, and I think just also Jim Cornette, psychology-wise, and trying to learn everything. I try to take as much advice as I can from everybody, and try to mold it in and try to make it make sense in my mind, And everybody, I would say, like the Nick Densmores and the Flash Flanagans here at Ohio Valley Wrestling are some of the guys that I like to watch, and if I can learn from them, they're very they can be entertaining, and they've been around here for 4 or 5 years, and so they know pretty much how to work around here, and I think those guys have been a big help to me.
Well, how was working on the January 30th show? Because you've been wrestling as far as like the professional before, relatively small crowds, and then all of a sudden you're out there in front of over 5,000 people. You're on the same show with Steve Austin, Jim Ross is there.
Yeah.
You did the shooting star press in like one of the first matches on the show, and kind of like nobody was really. I don't know if people were expecting that. I'm sure the fans were not from someone of your size. What was what was your feelings before that show?
I was very excited for that show. We'd put a lot of time into that show, and I just wanted to show Jim Ross and those guys that I'm trying my damnedest to become a professional wrestler, and I wanted to show also Jim Cornette and Danny Davis that I'm very capable and of doing whatever they want me to do, So, but I was very excited for the show, and me and Shelton, I think, being very green and stuff, we worked together very well, and I think we had an exciting, great first tag match of the night, and we got a big pop. We got big pops, and it was very exciting. Shelton's very athletic, and me being almost 300 pounds, and I think we pretty much we entertained. I hope so.
Has anybody from the WWF talked to you about a possible time frame for moving up, or have they not even mentioned that yet?
I don't know. I'm just right now. I'm just trying to learn every single day, and with them making some cuts and stuff down here now, and I'm not even sure. I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm told, and I'm not even close to being ready. I wouldn't assume that they'd want to bring me up, if I'm not ready. So, and me personally, I'm not ready. I need a good, 6 or 8 more months, or, even more than that. So, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to spend the time to become the best. I put 19 years in to become a NCAA Division I champion, and I know that for me to step in and even try to be a WWF champion, it's going to take a lot longer than a year, unless you're a Kurt Angle, So I'm very satisfied for where I'm at right now, but I'm not saying that I don't my goal is higher than I should, because that is my goal to become a WWF champion. But in retrospect and in reality, I'm very happy and I'm learning, and that's all I can ask for right now.
In the amateur thing, One thing that you mentioned earlier, your junior year in college, you were second in the NCAAs. A couple of years earlier, as a senior in high school, you were not even state champion. What happened? Was there a year or a point where all of a sudden in your mind you go, hey, I can beat anybody, or a year? I mean, what happened in that interim?
What was the turning point?
Yeah, it was a turning point.
I think it's a maturity level thing. I think in high school I was a late bloomer. When I graduated, when I was a senior in high school, I was maybe 6 feet tall, and I was lucky if I weighed 200 pounds. And then I was wrestling up against guys that were very more mature than me, so I didn't really have that chance to excel and become the person that I was supposed to be until 2 or 3 years later down the road. It just took me I consider myself a late bloomer, so by the time I was at my peak, I was weighing 275 pounds, and I grew 4 inches taller. I think it was a maturity thing, and I think as I spent more time in the weight room and spent more time surrounded by great people, like the people at the University of Minnesota and most of my trainers and coaches, they made me believe in myself, and I think it was a confidence thing. I think the turning point for me was probably my freshman year at junior college, when I had got beaten by this kid in the semifinals who couldn't hardly chew gum and tie his shoes at the same time. I was so disgusted with myself that I had just gotten beat by this guy that looks like a marshmallow. And here I had spent so many hours in the gym and so many hours running, and this guy catches me, and beats me out of, a fluke, So I think that was probably my turning point. I woke up the next day and I was like, you know what? It's time for me to get serious. It's time for, things to change. And I think that was probably my turning point right there.
Did you ever meet?
I'm asking this because you said marshmallow, but what were your thoughts on Gardner versus?
Rulon Gardner and Alexander Karelin. What were your
Yeah.
I'm not a big Greco-Roman fan. I never have been a big Greco fan, and I think it's a easy way out of wrestling. I think it's just a push and shove match. I've always hated stallers, people that hold back and don't shoot, or who just slide by. I hate that style of wrestling. And for Rulon Gardner to beat Karelin, in my eyes, I was happy for him, but at the same time, it was kind of disgusting at the same time, because here you got a guy that was never an NCAA champion, or just somebody that just doesn't look to play the part, and it doesn't have to be. That just goes to show that in Greco-Roman, you don't have to look like the Karelin to beat the Karelin, Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was kind of disgusting and happy for him at the same time, but in retrospect and looking back, Karelin never should have been there, Karelin was past his time anyway, and I think when it comes to Olympic level wrestling, politics play a big part in who's going to win and who's making it to the finals. I think that has a big part in it, because the referees are very political.
Really?
I think that the reffing system in the Olympic levels of wrestling, in Greco-Roman and in freestyle, because Russia is such a strong wrestling country that, and Karelin was built to be this person that, the Frankenstein of wrestling, the unstoppable,
The creation.
It was, I don't know. I'm happy for Rulon, and I'm happy for him and everything like that, but I'm not, like I said, I'm not a fan of Greco-Roman, and I don't think that match should have never even taken place.
Did you ever consider no holds barred fighting with your size and everything like that?
Yes, I did, and I trained between my sophomore year and junior year, because I spent some time in California, and I spent some time doing some submission fighting and stuff like that. But I was gonna attend a tournament in Reno actually that summer, but it would it was gonna mess with my eligibility for wrestling, so I couldn't join it and be a part of it. So I just, by the time when I got out of college, it was time for, there was really no money in it, and I didn't see see a good idea of me going out and and either getting beat up or beating somebody up for $1,200 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So,
Who did you train with?
I trained I went down to the Lions Den. I spent actually I went down there, and that's actually what turned me on to the wrestling was Ken Shamrock and Frank in California. I stopped by the Lions Den one day, and I never trained there, but I just that's what got me into it. And then I trained in Lassen, California. There was just a submission little school there, and I never really trained with any top athletes, but I just spent some time with a submission specialist, and and he kind of got me into it a little bit. But I never really had a heck of a lot of time because I was taking summer school and this, that, and the other, so it just kind of faded away.
Did you ever bump into Vern Gagne in Minnesota?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Oh really?
Vern is a big sponsor of the University of Minnesota, and he's a big fan of it. And I met Vern.
Did he give you any advice as far as going into pro or what to look out for or anything? Because I mean, he did it for forever and he promoted it, so he knows all the good and bad sides. Believe me.
Yep. Yeah. I spent a lot of time with Vern. I spent a lot of time on the phone with him and a lot of time at his house and talking to him and just he was gave me a lot of advice and I spent a lot of time with this was before I even signed with anybody, with Kurt Hennig and Brad Rangens, talking with those guys. And I don't know if the names Wayne Bloom and those guys.
Oh yeah, I remember them.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time talking to those guys, and they were a lot of help to me.
Did they ever try to hook you up with Japan wrestling? Because a college wrestler might have an easy. It's an easier transition to Japan because they think they respect that reality more, whereas American, it's more entertainment oriented. Yeah,
Brad, who works for New Japan, Brad Rangens, actually, I had a visit with Antonio Inoki in Minneapolis. Inoki came over to visit with me and stuff. So, but I just wanted to stay in the States. And
yeah. Because actually you're the kind of an athlete that they would love. I mean, basically because of what the Japanese like from foreigners plus the credentials.
Sure.
I mean, you're kind of tailor-made in a lot of ways for what Inoki's vision of pro wrestling, which is a very different vision than other people's.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure I understand it sometimes, but
I didn't even know who Inoki was when I had been training with Brad for probably 3 weeks out at Brad's house, Brad Rangens, and I didn't even know he had this meeting set up for me. Brad knew that I was going to meet with the WWF office, and so Brad, being the guy that he is, he didn't want to force anything on me, but he just told me that the New Japan office was coming and they wanted to meet with me, and I had no clue who Antonio Inoki was, and Brad put me in the ring with him, and we started shooting on each other. And Brad was, it was almost comical. And I had no idea who he was. And Brad was just in the back of his mind, playing a joke on me, and so me and Inoki wrestled for about an hour and a half straight.
Really?
Just doing submission stuff and trying to make each other, pin each other and submit, and it was kind of comical. And then at the end, Brad informed me on who he was and what was going on, and so he played a pretty big rib on me. So,
what was your thoughts of being in there? Because Inoki's like almost 60 years old, although he's in great shape for his age.
He's in excellent shape. Yeah, he's a machine, man. I tell you, it was just, now I look back and it'll be one of those things where 20 years from now I'll look back and just laugh at it, because it was so comical, and I had no clue. Here I am, this college wrestler, had no idea who Antonio Inoki was. So
20 years from now, you may be wrestling him.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I think he's done wrestling. But.
And I've got a couple of emails. We're going to get to the phone calls right after this. This is from Rick Baker, who goes, have you ever met Kurt Angle or Lou Thez?
I've met Kurt Angle, but I've never met Lou Thez before. And Kurt, I think I've met Kurt in amateur, I went to one of his camps, like back in '90. It was quite like '93. That was the first time I ever met Kurt, and then after that, I'd met him at the house show in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, if that answers your question, but never Lou Thesz before. No.
What do the people in amateur wrestling feel about Kurt Angle? Because I know at the beginning, I actually follow amateur fairly close, and I know at the beginning it was almost like when he first went into pro wrestling, it was like they just didn't even acknowledge it. I mean, at all. It was like, and now all of a sudden, it's like everyone's like, oh wow, this is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's that old analogy, it's like jumping on the bandwagon. I mean, what could they say? What can they say now? Of course, they're going to say horrible things. I'm glad Kurt went and did what he did and has gotten to where he has gotten because. It made it easier on us amateur guys, a heck of a lot easier, to follow in his footsteps. But they can't say nothing about, stepping in and a year and a half later being the WWF champion. And I'm very happy for Kurt, and I think that it's great that somebody that knows the amateur people and the way of life, the amateur life, and can become a WWF champion. I think it's great. But as far as people talking down about him, now, of course they're not going to now, I mean, he's become successful at it, and they definitely were going to turn their backs on him if he wasn't successful. That's just the way people are, and I think it's great. I'm happy for Kurt.
He really changed a lot of minds because, I would say probably through the 60s, mid-60s, a lot of amateur wrestlers went into pro and were very successful, like Vern Gagne, Jack Briscoe, Dick Hutton, Ray Gunkel. I mean, there's just a little Denny Hodge. I mean, there's just one after Gorilla Monsoon, one after another. And then around in the mid-60s, the mentality in pro wrestling was, for a lot of various different reasons, that amateur wrestlers didn't make good pros, and they kind of... and there were a few that came in. Steve Williams did pretty well, late Gary Albright, but very few actually. And then Angle came in, and it opened the doors for you and Sylvester Turkai, who's also in Ohio Valley, and Shelton Benjamin, and just like they really like. I think that it's just kind of interesting that one guy just coming in and being so successful is all of a sudden people are going like, oh, maybe looking at like a top amateur. I mean, I know like with Jim Ross. I mean. His mentality is that if you're a top-level amateur wrestler, that you're used to a lot of dedication and a lot of sacrifice without necessarily a lot of gain monetarily, and you're not going to cry about, your fingernail being broken, and you're basically going to be a tough guy if you can make it to that level, and he thinks that that's the kind of people that, in the WWF, it's a different kind of punishment, but, you got to be able to take pain and not cry about it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think one thing that was very important for Jim Ross when I met with him was the fact that what you said, the amateur level people, no dedication. They have a lot of heart. They know what it is to be dedicated. They're not going to cry over spilt milk. We're gonna compete no matter what. I mean, if my finger's broken, I'm gonna wrestle the next day. Because that's a way of life for us, I mean, we didn't. If I tore my rotator cuff or if I subluxed my kneecap, I'm going to wrestle the next day. I'm going to try to wrestle, but I'm going to take a little time off if I need to, and I guarantee you I'll be back on the mat in a week. I think that's the mental attitude that the amateur people have, and I think that was one of the things that Jim was pressing on when I met with him, was stating that the amateur people are very durable, and that's what they were looking for. So,
what are your other friends in the amateur world that have seen like the success of Kurt Angle and how much fun you're having, and just go, this is something that I want to do?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I look back and I think some days I take this job for granted because, where else can I mean, this is the perfect job. I mean, so it's just amazing to me how I can just spend time in the weight room, spend time taking care of my body, spend time in the ring, throwing guys around, getting thrown around. It's the best job in the world. And I'm very thank God every day, and I thank the WWF for giving me this opportunity. So I'm enjoying myself.
Any
What are your
specific
thoughts
names
of,
of people that you think could just be awesome?
I didn't understand you. Repeat yourself, please?
Oh, any specific names that you know that you think could do really good?
Oh, like any of the guys like at Minnesota or some college wrestlers that you've seen that you think might be suited for this?
Right now, as far as I think that Brandon Eggum, he wrestled 184 pounds for the University of Minnesota. I think he could do a very good job. I mean, there's a handful of guys in the Division I ranks that could have this opportunity, and this, that's top of my head right now. No, I mean, as you look in the heavyweight class this year, very young guys and very small heavyweights, which was wrestling this year. I mean, there was nobody out there that, I mean, the guy that won heavyweight was 235 pounds, versus, you got Stephen Neal or I myself or Kerry McCoy or the Tolly Thompsons, which were all, 260, 70-pound guys, So the heavyweight class this year was very small. The guy that replaced me, Garrett Lowney, which was a Greco-Roman, he placed third at the Olympic Games this year, is not a big guy. He's 225 pounds, 6 feet, 1. Not very good, but I could see a handful of guys, but who's to say? Who's to say that I'm going to be a good professional wrestler? I'm trying my damnedest, but who's to say that I'm going to be? So it's hard to say.
As an amateur wrestler, what are your thoughts of Cale Sanderson?
Oh wow. I got to spend a lot of time with Cale last summer, and I did quite a few camps with Cale. Talk about a nice guy. Talk about a very talented kid.
Humble too.
Very humble. Very humble. He's the nicest guy in the world. I couldn't ask for anybody more to carry all that weight on his shoulders, and he's going to do a wonderful job by doing it. Winning his third NCAA championship this year. Just a great guy. Hopefully, I'm pulling for him again next year. And to be a 4-time NCAA champion and go on and surpass Dan Gable, which I know that he could probably do.
I got a question. You're someone who's been through the top ranks of amateur wrestling for a couple of years. How difficult is it? Because to me, it seems like the idea that a guy could win 119 straight matches, it actually boggles my mind because, everyone's got a bad day. What if you have, a little bit of the flu and you face a tough guy? I mean, he hasn't lost in 3 years. As a freshman, he didn't lose.
It's amazing. I mean, I went through college, and in 4 years of college, I lost, 14 times. And I didn't even wrestle Division I for 2 years. It was junior college. For this kid to go 119, 120, whatever it is, unbeaten, I have a lot of respect for the guy. Me being an amateur wrestler, that's amazing. I'm happy for the guy.
Let's start taking phone calls. We'll start with Harant in California. You're first up with Brock Lesnar.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Really good.
Hey.
First couple comments for Brock. One aspect that seems to hold true about amateur wrestlers is their dedication and their work ethic. And I think if you combine those two things that you have with that tremendous physique and all the wrestling talent and all the wrestling knowledge you have at Ohio Valley, I think it's going to be a matter of time before we see you as a player on TV. And I just wanted to let you know that even though we don't get to see you out here in California, you do have people that do appreciate what you are doing. And just wanted to tell you to keep going, man.
Hey, thanks a lot. I mean, that's good to hear. I appreciate it.
No problem. Second thing is actually for the show. You guys put the show on 10 hours a week, and honestly, to me, it's the 10 hours most entertaining of wrestling that I get a week.
Thanks.
I do listen to the Law, and I like the Law, but I think the show is just on a whole different level. And the knowledge
really?
you get.
I mean, I love doing the Law myself. So.
Yeah, the Law is such a fun show, and it's good to hear the Canadian aspect of it, too. But I just think this show is just on a different level. Now, I have a question for you, Dave. I think you might have covered this a couple of weeks ago, but my computer crashed right about when you guys are covering it, so just wanted to go ahead and ask you this. A couple of years ago, there was a segment on one of the Raws where it was actually November of '97, and it was one of the first DX segments, and it was when Shawn and Hunter were doing a rib with bananas. Now, at that time, my friend told me an odd story that I don't know if you want me to bring up, but basically...
You don't have to bring them up, you know.
I'm sorry?
But you don't have to bring them up, but that's probably the true story, the one you're thinking.
Did it involve Mr. Cornette?
I have always heard that, yes.
Okay.
It's not the one that involves Dave.
Okay, no,
not the one with the bananas. That's a different story.
In the picture, I was told, and I just want to clarify if that was true.
That's what I always heard. Yes.
Okay. Well, guys, I just want to tell you guys how I basically felt about the show, and Brock, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll hear from you guys again.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, we're gonna go to John in Florida. John, how you doing today?
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Listen, I got a question to ask you. Is anything going to happen at WrestleMania that's supposed to happen with the WCW guys and the WWF guys?
Everything that's supposed to happen hopefully will happen. As far as for the WCW guys, I'm not sure. I think that they should. I think something should happen.
Because I think Wade Teller's full of shit. Be honest with you.
What's he saying?
What did he say?
He's got
you should hear him. Booker T's going to be in Shane's corner. He's going to challenge The Rock.
Maybe they'll do that. That wouldn't be the worst. That's not the worst idea in the world. They still got to make a lot of deals because right now, everyone's pretty much on hold. If they can make it'd be a good part of the show as far as, I have not heard of anything happening, but at the same time, I'm probably the person that they wouldn't tell that to first, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
At least until after the show. After the show, they'll tell me, but I don't think they'll tell me before.
Is it
if
true
Linda wasn't going to be
Sting?
there in the wheelchair, I would think for sure that somebody would be in Shane's corner. But the fact that she's there, I don't know.
It almost distracts, because I think the big pop's Linda coming out, and if there's too many things going on, but then again, it's Vince's match, so there are going to be too many things going on, because there has to be. It's Vince,
It
is
is
it
the
true
main
about
event.
Sting?
What about Sting?
They're reporting that he don't want to work for Vince, so he's going to retire.
I think that's a very good chance, yes. Nothing's for sure. Believe me, nothing's for sure, but I would not be surprised that that's not how that winds up. Sting's never really wanted to work there. He's expressed that. He's got a great contract that he could sit out on. Retire is a funny word because, when the contract's up in 10 months or a year, whenever Sting's contract's up, by then he may want to work there, and they may want him a lot. You never know where the business is going to be in a year. There may be a spot for, someone that they need in a hurry. You just can't predict the future in wrestling.
What are these guys going to do when the money runs out at the end of their contract?
Then I think that either if they saved enough money, they may retire, or they'll go to work for Vince. They're not going to have much
I don't need to work
That's
no
about
more.
it. What?
Nash doesn't
said I
need
don't
to
need
work.
to work no more. I got plenty. I got millions.
He does have millions.
Yeah, Nash is too cool. You got to remember that, and Nash is never going to sell the fact that they don't want him. So if he thinks they don't want him, which seems to be the idea, he's going to make it out like he doesn't want them. That's just the way he's going to do it.
Yeah.
And
Any truth to HHWF happening?
HHW.
H.
What? Am I missing something?
Hulk Hogan's Wrestling Federation with
Yeah, I'm sure he's always talking to people who know. The problem, we talked about it all week. The problem's TV. There's enough talent out there to start a new company if you've got a great television time slot.
But I thought Rupert Murdoch wanted Hulk Hogan.
At times he did, but wrestling's got people see wrestling on the downslide, and the TV is not that. These stations, obviously, if Rupert Murdoch wanted wrestling that bad, Eric Bischoff would have would have a new company to be on Fox. Obviously, he doesn't want it that bad because that hasn't happened.
What's
The fact that Vince is getting 11 o'clock time slot should tell you a lot.
Yeah, that's the other thing. In fact, Vince is getting 11 on TNN, which is a weak station. That the best he's getting is 11 o'clock time slot. That tells you what the television. It's
Vince
the
of all people.
Vince, yeah, the advertising
on a station
community.
He saved.
Yeah, the advertising community is not hot on wrestling right now. It's just the reality of the situation.
What's the chances of all the guys sitting out their contracts and Eric and Vince not wanting it and selling it back and Eric buying it?
0%.
Why?
that will not happen. Vince is not selling this to anyone. Vince didn't buy away his competition to give someone a key back into the door.
You think it was a good idea?
He's not going to build it up and then sell it.
Yeah.
What's the odds? Why did he buy it? I don't understand why.
to keep the competition away. As long as he's got the rights to these guys, actually, as long as it keeps, basically keeps the competition away. That's the reason. He's got it all. Plus, hey, interpromotional done right, interpromotional should make money.
All right, Dave. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Plus, he's got all those. He's also got all those hours that if they ever want to do something, whether it's the internet or for for a 24-hour wrestling channel down the line. Obviously, it's not their plans right now, but there's all that tape someday could be worth a lot of money, maybe a lot more than $10 million or whatever it is that he paid for it. I do think, as a business deal, the amount he bought it for is a steal, unless he just botches it up, which, he may, but I don't think he will.
I think $10 million's great just for the library alone.
Yeah, I know. So, whatever the name's worth, which isn't a whole lot right now, but could be if you rebuild it. Anyway, let's go to Rick in Connecticut. Rick, what's going on?
Hello. Hi. How you doing, guys?
Hello.
Hey.
About WCW, is there any chance of the deal falling through because of antitrust issues or anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, until the final papers are signed, it's just like with a Fusion deal. I guess there's a chance, but I think the chance is pretty darn slim. Because, in fact, I would say almost say there's no chance
right now.
I would say there's no chance because the bottom line is they've already folded the company, and there's no other buyers, and I would say no. I'd say that there's almost no chance that it's going to fall through.
As far as antitrust, aren't they technically not a monopoly because of all the independents and the other entertainment?
That is a very interesting. That's a very interesting case there. I would presume that somebody at some point will try to see if that's an antitrust thing. I could see that coming up. There are people who've talked to me about, and I don't know enough about antitrust law, so I don't know if they are or they're not, but it is something that's come up, especially because they're going to have, what I would say would be exclusive arena rights to every major arena. The TV is something. They won't have a monopoly on television unless nobody. They'll have it, but. It's not their fault. You can't blame them. There's other TV stations that just won't carry wrestling. I guess, where that will come up is if someone tries to start something, if they do something illegal against them, they could be in trouble. But I think that to stifle it. But my feeling is they don't need to do that, and they won't do that. And I don't think that they're believe me, the people who run that company, as far as like Linda McMahon, they are much too smart to fall into a trap where that's going to be their undoing, So
it's not illegal to have a great product and good production and a TV deal.
Yeah,
sure.
And the fact that nobody else,
the arena thing, that might be something there.
Yeah, but again, but that.
But there are other arenas. It's not like they have every single arena in the entire U.S. all locked up.
Yeah, but it's not like there's somebody out there who's trying to book all these arenas that's being told no because of WWF. So it's like right now, I don't know what anyone would have to complain about.
What's your feeling as far as just as far as how this is going to affect wrestling and WCW? I know that I feel kind of sad in this because with WCW being not being on Turner anymore and not being on Monday night. Kind of like the end of an era. How do you feel it's going to?
It's totally changed the business. I don't know how. I don't know, like 6 months or 18 months from now. I have no idea really what's going to happen. I don't think it's a good thing. I think that it's going to hurt wrestling in the long run. I think there may be one big pop coming up, and afterwards it's going to be hurting unless somebody comes in because competition is what made this business, and I hate to not see the competition. It makes it. It's harder for everyone. It's harder for the athletes. If Brock turns into a total superstar, it'd be a lot better if there were two different companies for him to put his services, whether it's Brock or The Rock or anyone in this industry. It's a lot better to have two companies, that are competing with each other rather than one giant company.
Competition makes both individuals stronger, So it's definitely. Although I think Vince is going to do a very good job of controlling both companies.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think? I've heard talk that Vince might fold it after 2 years or whatever. Do you think he's going to try to keep it around for? He's going to try to keep it around permanently. WCW as a separate company.
I think inevitably it's going to end up folded and merging into one. I just think that that's just the, as far as the timetable, nobody knows because the market is going to determine that. It's when Vince will close WCW when people stop going to WCW or stop watching it on TV or it costs too much to produce it as a separate thing. As long as he's making money with WCW, he won't fold it. So the market is going to determine the time frame. It's not like Vince is going to go in and go, okay, this is 18 months, and then I move on to something else. It's like this business, you can't even book more than a month ahead, or you're going to be in trouble. So,
if 18 months down the road they're making $100,000 profit a year, that thing's not going anywhere.
Exactly. So
I'm just hoping that maybe it'll be something like, the show becomes somewhat of a success. They move into a better time slot, and it convinces some network that maybe we should talk to Eric Bischoff. There's some guys out there. There's Kevin Nash and whoever else. Maybe we can start something up. I mean, right now it's not going to happen, but I think that if things go really well, maybe there's a chance that it will happen.
The best thing, if wrestling, Brian's right. If wrestling gets on fire again because of this, this like Fox and all them, they will want a piece of the action at that point. Right now, everyone's going like wrestling's on the downslide. Why get into something on the downslide? So the market's going to determine everything, and then it's like one guy. I mean, it's like if Ted Turner was still in power at Time Warner, this still might not have happened. Or Jamie Kellner was in power, maybe they would have just said, no, we can't do the WWF deal. We'll give it to Bischoff because we don't want to lose wrestling on these stations. It's like you just don't know who's going to be in what position and what. It's all, there's so many different factors. It's hard to predict.
Mm-hmm. And finally, as far as what do you know about what as far as Scott Steiner or Goldberg, as far as how badly or how not badly Vince wants those two, because it seems to me like you need those guys in WCW in order for it to be successful, and as far as like the next WrestleMania, as far as I can see right now, like a Goldberg and Steve Austin, or maybe even Scott Steiner in there would be a really big draw if those guys can stay healthy.
Done correctly. The thing is, I think Vince's feeling is he doesn't need anyone. I think, I don't know. I know that
Vince can make anybody into Scott Steiner or Goldberg. He can make his own person.
Yeah.
I think that's my opinion. I mean, he doesn't need somebody's success already and then to build off of it. I think, good to look at it, The Rock or Austin or all of his top talent. I mean, he doesn't need somebody, and then, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think, he's not going to go with the feeling that he needs them. I don't know what, again, they had a meeting. They don't want trouble in their locker room. That's a real major point there. And, there's different ways of looking at it. I mean, Steiner was in a bad environment, but he also did a lot of things that, they would never put up with. So he's going to have 2 strikes against him if they take him, and he's going to have to behave, which he probably would because I think he knows what the game is. Goldberg, he's got $6 million on the table on his contract from WCW. Vince is not going to pay him that money guaranteed, and probably even if unless he's the main event at WrestleMania for 2 straight years, he's going to get that kind of money. So, Bill Goldberg will probably be better off sitting out. If Vince wants him bad enough, obviously he can make it worth his while, but that's up to Vince. Everything's up to Vince. The ball is in his court on every decision. If he wants Steiner, he'll have Steiner. If he wants Goldberg, he'll have Goldberg. And if he doesn't want him, he ain't going to have him. So, he's the only one who can answer that question for 100%.
How about Ric Flair?
I think that they'll do the right thing to keep Ric Flair. I think it's a good name to have. Certainly, if you have WCW, I think that you need to have Ric Flair at least for a transition period to get some of those fans over. I think Ric Flair is a very important name in the Carolinas, and it's not even just that because they can draw in the Carolinas. They don't need Ric Flair, but I think that they would want to do the right thing for Ric Flair. Yeah. And I expect Flair will wind up there. It's not 100% either, but I just expect that Ric Flair and Vince McMahon have always gotten along, so it's not really a problem.
Do you think there's any possibility of Ric Flair feuding with The Rock at some point or something like that, or is that?
I don't see it unless The Rock begs for it, in which case I think they would do it. If Rock or Hunter want it just because it's like they're kind of like someone they grew up watching and just say, I really want to work a match with him just because I want to work a match with him. It'll happen. But I don't know that, Rick's 52 years old, and I mean, as much as we all love Rick, you can't take that away. I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, I watched him against Sting, and he's not the Ric Flair that he once was. You can't be when you're 52, and after, the thousands and thousands of matches that he's done.
Okay, I just have one last question. I read, is it true that Scott Steiner's an All-American, or?
Scott Steiner was, I think he took 4th or 6th in the NCAA tournament in '86, and at 190 pounds. He was I think he had a record, but yeah, he was an All-American in his senior year at University of Michigan. Rick Steiner was never an All-American, although he was a good heavyweight.
My final question this is my final question about Rick Steiner or Lex Luger. Is there any chance?
Pretty darn slim in both cases. I would think Lex Luger, I would think there's almost no chance.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
All right.
Take care.
Okay. Let's go to, is it Bill in Brooklyn?
Yeah. Hi, Mr. I have a question, a couple of questions I'd like to ask you guys. The first question is for Mr. Lester.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you thinking of taking your talent to UFC?
No. Not even a thought in my mind about that. Not at all.
Right. And what about the WWF? Are you planning on,
That's the plan. WWF for sure.
Is that crossing your mind or anything like that?
Is what crossing my mind?
I mean, are you planning on going to Vince or asking him to sign you on or whatever?
No, he's already signed to WWF.
I've already signed.
Wait. I'm so sorry, guys. I mean, this is my first time calling.
Yeah, he signed. He's got a developmental deal with WWF, and he's in Ohio Valley training for the WWF right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And the second question is for you, Dave. What's the deal here? What's the word on Bischoff? What's his status now? What has he actually said about anything?
Regarding what? He's very disappointed. I can tell you that.
Yeah, what is he doing now?
I don't really know. I mean, he's very disappointed because he didn't expect it to turn out like this. I will tell you that they had always figured that if they didn't get WCW, they would start their own company. The idea that the TV networks would have no interest in wrestling was something that they didn't even realize until the last 2 weeks, and it hit them like a ton of bricks, and he's very disappointed. I mean, the losing of the WCW deal to Vince is not, it's like 2% of the disappointment. It's the inability to get television at this time for anyone, which is the 98%. That's the real big story. Vince buying the company is a big story, too, but the Turner networks canceling wrestling is a much bigger story. Right. And the fact that these other networks don't want wrestling, that's even bigger. Those are the real stories here.
Well, do you think Vince would, hire Bischoff to handle the WCW?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely no chance.
Okay, and...
run it from a management position, or just like an on-screen character?
There's a chance on-screen character, there's a chance. I wouldn't rule that one out, but as far as... I wouldn't expect it, but as far as running it from a management perspective, there is no chance. Okay,
and what about Goldberg? You said something earlier there about Goldberg, I overheard.
I expect Goldberg to, no one knows because it's up to, if Vince makes an offer and wants him, Vince can get him. But my impression is that Goldberg, I think it's more likely Goldberg's going to be sitting out. I don't know if we'll see as far as Bill Goldberg in wrestling. I mean, it's going to be an amazing story of this guy who was this unbelievable, phenomenon in 1998, and here it is 2001. I mean, ever since the end of 1998, his career has just gone. Boy, that's a story. The career of Bill Goldberg in wrestling. I mean, it's an amazing story. When he came through in 98, who would have ever thought that he would have never done anything after 98 in wrestling, that he would, between the injuries and the bad booking and then this buyout, it's like this career.
That's the thing people have to look at, too, is like a guy like Ric Flair. Ric Flair's been handled very, very badly at times, and he's done all right. But with Goldberg, he's a guy that if he's not handled perfectly, it's real bad news. So.
Right. Okay. So one last question, guys. Do you think, like, somewhere down the road that Vince McMahon would give up the WCW for sale? He would let somebody else buy it?
No. It's going to be with him, and then when it's no longer profitable, it will cease to exist. It's not like he's going to sell it off. No. Unless, I mean, you can never say never, but not at this time.
And what will he really sell anyway? He's not going to sell a profitable company. He's not going to sell the library back.
I mean, you know, when it gets better, you know, Fox or, you know, might want to, you know, purchase it from him, you know.
Oh, but if it's profitable, why would he want to sell it?
Well, you got a good point there.
I mean, he's either gonna fold it, or he's gonna keep it forever. I mean, and what's gonna end up happening is if it's not doing well, he's gonna merge the good talent into the WWF, and that's the inevitability. That is what's gonna happen. Whether it may be 5 years from now, and it may be 9 months from now, it's all gonna end up merging into one at some point. I mean, the WCW name will not be around forever. Well, it won't be around. I mean, it's not gonna be around in 4 years or 5 years. I don't think, unless. You know, because you can't keep the feud going forever. I mean, at some point, you know, the people are going to get tired of the feud. They're going to have to move on to something else. And at that point, you know, he's going to have to just, you know, merge the companies.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. I love your show.
This is from Dave Galvin. This is about something that we talked about. He goes, from what I've been researching in my coverage of the Microsoft trial, it is not illegal to have a monopoly if you happen to purchase your competition by being inventive or by being in the right place at the right time. What is illegal is if you were to use your monopoly to keep a monopoly, or if you were to use it to gain a monopoly in another area, such as Microsoft telling computer manufacturers that if they wanted Windows 95, they couldn't have Netscape Navigator on their machines. Microsoft was trying to push their own Internet Explorer. That's what got them in trouble. I think that whatever it is, I think that the WWF doesn't need to be involved in any. The nature of being in wrestling, and Vince McMahon grew up in the wrestling business, is to, to engage in
anti-competition by the throat and squeeze.
Stab him in the back and do everything to him. Now, but he is so much higher than all this competition that he really doesn't even need to worry about that, and that's why I don't see him getting into trouble because, you know, let's just say XPW gets, you know, I don't know, some television somewhere and wants to book things. You know, for Vince to, like, you know, why even waste his time? I mean, he's got all this stuff that he's got to do, plus the XFL, if that thing keeps going. So it's just one of those things where I don't see them falling in that trap, but I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, let's get to as many phone calls as we can in our remaining minutes. Starting with Jay in New York. Jay, what's going on?
Nothing much. My question is, do you think that Eric Bischoff was actually capable of running the WCW?
In what sense? Do I think he was capable? He did a great job with it, and then he did a horrible job with it. So he's capable in both. He's been both capable and incapable. As far as for the future, I would have guessed that it would not succeed ultimately, but you know, I wouldn't bet my house on it not succeeding. I know that they had a lot of good ideas on the table, and they had a whole bunch of new people they were going to bring in for different positions, and you know, we were going to have a fresh approach, and maybe it would have worked, and maybe it wouldn't. You know, you don't know for sure. You never got the chance to do the deal.
Okay, my last question is, what do you think the odds of Goldberg versus Stone Cold Steve Austin are?
Whatever Vince wants him to be. If Vince wants the match, it's going to happen. You know, it's funny. Everyone keeps asking about that. If Vince wants it bad enough, he can make money with it, but he'll also upset the salary structure of his company, and it's his decision on whether he's going to do that. And based on the information I've been told, and of course they could change their mind on a dime, it's not going to happen. But you know, again, they could change. As I said, they could change their mind tomorrow, and it will happen, and they'll just make Goldberg the right offer, and he'll come.
And how is Goldberg like getting the injuries? How bad are they? Are they?
He had a torn rotator cuff. He had a torn rotator cuff.
About. He punched through a window.
Yeah, that was real bad. He nearly lost his arm off that one, and the torn rotator cuff. It's an injury you get in sports.
Yeah.
So.
Are they career-threatening, most of them, or?
When he punched through the window, he could have lost his arm. If you lost your arm, it's career-ending. The rotator cuff, you know, everyone, I don't say everyone in wrestling, but many people in wrestling have had the rotator cuff They've had the surgery. They've come back pretty much the same. You know, Flair had it a couple of times. Billy Gunn had it. Who else has had the torn rotator? Well, Billy Gunn didn't come back as good, but what can I say?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Let's go to Heath in St. Louis. Heath, what's going on?
Hey, Dave. I got a couple of things for you. I got a couple of questions, actually. First of all, with the gimmick battle royal, with the new acquisition of WCW, what's the chances of us seeing the Red Rooster?
It's up to them. I would say if somebody, again, this is one of those things, if you were in that meeting, that writers meeting, and you said, hey, let's bring in the Red Rooster, I'll bet you it would happen. But if you're not in that meeting and nobody thought of it, then it probably won't happen. But yeah, they could get him, and, Terry Taylor's in good enough shape. He's going to be in better shape than some of those guys that are in there, that's for sure.
And
the Sheik, my God.
Along the same line with that Battle Royal, with the Gobbledygooker, obviously someone's going to have to be inside it. And obviously, something that's going to be, where everybody's going to be, there you go. Wouldn't it be more or less like Pete Rose? I mean, everybody
thinks that.
Right.
And it may be.
But maybe there, and maybe in the hardcore match. I just think he's going to win that hardcore title.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you were writing, he would.
I don't know about that, but
oh no, you would come up with the idea and go, hey, this was a really dumb idea. Let's not do it now. And they're going to go,
I'd go have an idea. Let's not use.
But and the final thing is with WCW with the like we basically said, it's not a very good time to have it on there. And one of the best things I would have thought of that you could possibly do with something like that was with Paul E. and basically you have the ECW roster in their contract, and if not, it's not going to take much to get them on that contract. Why can you not basically put the ECW talent with Paulie run it under WCW's name on something late night, see what it can do with that, and then bring in guys such as like Brock and whoever else from the OVW.
Well, they'll bring.
You mean have an ECW show?
Yeah, like with under the WCW logo. It's got name recognition, but now everybody's saying they're seeing ECW. And then this also, a good stepping stone.
Okay, here's the thing. ECW was on TNN and it failed.
Right.
Vince is not gonna put something on that failed already, and it failed in a much better time slot than 11 p.m. on Saturday night.
True. But Vince didn't have his finger on it. Now.
No. You're right. He didn't. But the WCW name is still way more valuable than the ECW name. As far as I expect that there will be some ECW talent thrown into that mix. Mm-hmm. As far as who runs it, if it hasn't been decided, I'm of the impression that Heyman will not be heavily involved in that thing. But if they make the decision to make him, then he will. But that's again, all this stuff is stuff that still needs to be worked out. I've been given impressions of things, but this can all change on everything that I've been told, and I've been told a lot, can all change.
But what was the main objective bringing Heyman in? I understand to take over Lawler's.
He's got a great booking mind. He really does. He's just and he's got a great booking mind.
Oh yes, he
does.
A
great creative mind, and that's the objective. And he needed a job.
They were interested long before Lawler was gone too.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Lawler left on a Tuesday afternoon and they went, isn't there a guy named Paul Heyman that used to run a company that we might be able to get a hands on?
They'd been talking to Heyman for months and months. The deal was 80% done a long time ago. When they realized that Paul wasn't going to be able to make it, and Paul's decision was, what Paul was doing, he was stalling out going there, hoping that the miracle would happen, and the miracle didn't happen. And, I talked to him about, he was the first one who told me, and, he didn't, and his timing wasn't quite right, okay? He did expect the TBS, one of the things, because I was talking to him about it, it's like, okay, why don't you just sit it out for 6 months, okay? And this is not like advice to him. We talked about everything that was going on in wrestling. But it was like, okay, what about the idea of sitting out for 6 months? If Bischoff succeeds, you can always go to Vince, or to Bischoff, because he's got a great creative mind, even though Bischoff and Paulie don't get along at all.
Right.
Or if Bischoff fails, you start something up and you go on those Turner stations. That's great time slots. With those time slots, you can maybe do something. And his thing is they're going to cancel if Bischoff fails. Okay, they're going to cancel that wrestling on that time slot. I won't have that opportunity. And he, the way he saw the landscape, he played his cards where I got to go to Vince. I have no other alternative, and that's what he did. And he was righter than he thought he was at the time.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Dave, and I like your show. Love it. So, and Brock, keep up the good work, man.
Hey, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go to John in California. John, what's up?
Gentlemen, how you doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Hey.
Dave, I'm heading up to WrestleMania this weekend, gonna do the meet and greet, and I know how you've always said you don't call, let's say, Midian Dennis Knight, because he's known as Tex and stuff like that. These are people I have admired all my life. What are some do's and don'ts of a meet and greet without just me falling
You've
over my
admired
face?
Midian all your life?
I'm sorry?
You've admired Midian all your life?
Oh, yeah. No, but you know what I mean.
Okay.
No, just be nice. Don't when you meet a wrestler, don't try to be a smart ass and try to pretend that hey, I'm smart, I know something, because that's like turn off number one. Just be nice and just go, how's your kids? Or I don't know. Just be friendly. There's some guys in every profession who are dicks, but most people in wrestling, if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you back.
I've heard some meet and greets are really bad, like Crash Holly and Big Boss Man. You think that
really
they'll go all out on this one?
It may be the day or whatever. There's, some. I don't know.
Even the nicest guy has a bad day, so
yeah.
Just say hi.
They may have a problem with their girlfriend that day. I mean, there's weird things that they're all human beings, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know of I couldn't tell you like who's everyone that I meet in wrestling. They're usually pretty nice. There's some that aren't. What can you say?
All right, gentlemen, take care. Have a good weekend.
Okay, let's go to is it Chris in Virginia?
Yes, it is.
Yes, Chris. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? My first question is to Brock, Mr. Lesnar.
Yeah.
I was wondering, who would you like to work with in the WWF?
Who would I like to work with?
Yeah.
I would like to work with anybody that I get the opportunity to work with, but I think I'd like to work with Kurt Angle. The mastermind, Steve Austin, would be great. Undertaker, anybody. I wouldn't deny anybody. I would be more than happy to work with anybody, any of the stars up there.
Did you get a chance to meet Austin when he came to Louisville?
Yeah, very nice guy. But I mean, it wouldn't bother me. I would work with whoever. China, I don't care.
Whoa.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
China?
I'm cringing when you brought that one up.
Also,
no, I have no problem working with anybody, But I think the person that I would really like to work with would be Kurt, probably, just because of his amateur background and me, both of us being shooters and amateurs. I think it'd be great to work with Kurt.
Have you wrestled Sylvester Terkay since you've been there?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I have.
Any thoughts as far as that went, or?
Per se, what are you trying to?
I don't know. I mean, just both being NCAA champions. I mean, did you do a lot of amateur like in your match, or was it just? Or did you just try to both?
When I first got down here, we did a lot of amateur, but now the WWF knows that I was a good amateur wrestler, and I'm trying to become a professional wrestler, so I need to adapt to become a professional wrestler, So we do. Actually, I've worked with Sylvester quite a bit, and the matches have become more professional.
Mm-hmm.
Professional wrestling.
The first time I saw you wrestle, it was probably your first television match. You did a suplex. I think it was a Jerome Crony, but I could be wrong with the guy. It was a smaller guy. And it was like a double arm suplex, and he rotated in midair. It was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Yeah, now what was that your idea, or did he just come up with this idea? Because I was looking at this going this is I never seen anything like this before.
That was Jim Cornette's idea for me to come in and give him a double arm suplex, but I gave it with a little more authority than I should have.
You weren't used to throwing around guys that were that small, are you?
No, that was I just saw Crony last night work, and we laugh about it every time we see each other.
So that spot wasn't planned then. It just happened.
Yeah, it just happened that way.
Oh, because I saw that and I'm going now that was impressive.
It just happened that way.
Al, are there any calls on the line? No more calls. Okay, let's run to a couple of emails real quick. We got just a couple minutes left in the show. Let's see. Explain to me this. If WCW is only offering 30 cents on the dollar and guys like Nash and Goldberg are going to sit out their contracts, why doesn't Time Warner up their offer to 50 cents on the dollar to save them money? Actually, that would cost them money. Oh, no, it would save them money in the long run, yeah. And then the wrestlers like Goldberg might be more inclined to go to the WWF. They may. This is all stuff that needs to be worked out. I mean, again, nobody, like Nash and Goldberg, have not heard from Time Warner. I mean, the 30 cents on a dollar is stuff that has come out, and it probably is true, but they have not actually made those offers to Goldberg or Nash, and Vince has not made any offers.
I don't think any of the top names have been talked about yet as far as the buyout.
No, none of them have. I mean, I can't say none because I don't know everyone, but none that I've talked to have, and none have gotten, bona fide this kind of offer from Vince. And until those two things happen, they can't even make a decision. It's like, guys that have talked today. I mean, it's like, Nash has gone public because Nash has this idea of what's going to happen. Plus, he knows they don't want him. Goldberg and Sting, they have their own minds. But most of the guys, like, whether DDP, Booker T, Ric Flair, all of those guys, I mean, they got to hear from both sides and then figure out exactly what's in their best financial interest. And since they haven't heard from either side, there's really, when you talk about a decision, I mean, they don't even have the facts to make the decision, let alone have made the decision.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is...
One of the things that I've learned in being so green in this business in 7 months is never say never. Anything is possible in this business, and it just goes to prove that.
Sure.
In the past 2 weeks now that anything can happen.
What was the thoughts at camp when the word kind of got out that WWF was buying WCW? I mean, I know none of you guys are really affiliated with WCW at all. But, did anyone talk about it, or was it just sort of like, well...
there's been a lot of changes down here as well. I mean, we lost... there's been some developmental guys that are, I think, down here that are going to be losing their contracts.
Has anyone done that yet, or is that just, like, kind of the rumors you've heard?
That's just some of the rumors that I've heard. I think on the...
I think Ross mentioned it in the report.
But that was before... That was before.
The Ross report is going to state this week, I think, who is being released.
Yeah, but those decisions were made before this buyout because they were going to cut. They were thinking of cutting some of the developmental guys they didn't think were going to make it. That was decision was probably made about 4 weeks ago. I'm thinking.
But I don't think that the buyout really helped them guys out any either. So.
Yeah, I agree because now they have so many people under contract and. Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or bad for me or the same as the guys down here. I have no idea, But like I said, only thing that we can do down here is just keep doing our job and try to do it the best we can.
What's as far as is there any reason why like Shelton has like really, I mean, he's really caught on and his acrobatics are pretty spectacular. Was he a guy when he was an amateur wrestler who was acrobatic? I guess he really don't do like flips or nothing in amateur wrestling, but certainly like with the what's the word I'm looking for, the agility, dexterity. Yeah. Was he known for that in amateur?
He was known for his speed and agility, yeah. But I think what helps Shelton out a lot is he's watched it since he was a young kid, and he pretty much the guy can do anything. All he has to do is see somebody do it, or he just sits at home and plays his video games, and he gets ideas off of his video games. He a lot of watching the sport of wrestling and video games is really I think what attributes his talent.
Do they give you a lot of tapes to watch down there too?
Yeah, we watch. We have tapes that we would have to watch, training tapes and so on. And Cornette gives us a tape every couple of weeks to watch of old school wrestling and the matches that happened long ago. Good psychology matches. But
where did you get the idea of doing the Shooting Star Press on that show?
We were in practice one day, and me and Shelton are very competitive, and everything that Shelton does, I tried to do, and pretty much I can do everything that he can do. And one day he was trying to do the Shooting Star Press, and he couldn't do it, and I got up there the next day, and I just did it. And this was in practice. And everybody was like, and I was like, whoa, I can't believe I just did that, and So I kept practicing it, and actually it was Shelton's idea and then Danny Davis's idea of that we should incorporate that into the match, and so it was one of those things where like, yeah, I'll do it, you know. And I did it 300 times on the crash pad, and then I had guys laying down for me, and I hit it every time. So it was, I felt safe doing it, and my opponents feel safe taking it. So I think it was Shelton's idea, pretty much.
Brock, we're totally out of time. I want to thank you very much for doing the show, and I want to wish you the best of luck in your training. And hopefully we'll see you in the WWF before too long, and you'll have a successful career in pro as you did in amateur.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, you guys. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay, you're very welcome. And Brian, thanks, of course, for being here. And Al, thanks again. And we will see everybody tomorrow at 5. We're going to have Daryl Peterson, who was also a heck of an amateur wrestler before he became a pro wrestler, as Max Payne. And we'll be taking your phone calls and emails on the news that everyone wants to talk about tomorrow as well. And, of course, don't forget Sunday right after Mania. And we'll see you tomorrow at 5.